For decades, Paul Hogan was known as the rugged Australian star who conquered Hollywood and became a global icon. Millions watched his rise, his success, and the relationships that made headlines around the world. But behind the fame, laughter, and unforgettable screen presence was a deeply personal story that remained largely untold. Now, at 86, Hogan has opened up about the woman who truly shaped his life. After years of silence, what has he finally revealed about the love he never forgot? Long before his name became known around the world, Paul Hogan lived a life that looked very different from the one people would later see on movie screens. He was born on October 8, 1939, in Sydney, Australia. The country was changing after the difficult years of war, and like many families of that era, the Hogans lived a simple life. There were no signs that a future international star was growing up in their neighborhood. Paul was just another young Australian boy learning about hard work, family, and responsibility. As he grew older, life was not filled with glamour. Instead, it was filled with ordinary routines. He attended school, spent time with friends, and learned the values that many working-class Australians shared. Those who knew him often noticed his quick wit and easygoing personality. He had a natural ability to make people laugh, even during everyday conversations. Yet comedy was not a career he imagined for himself. Like many young men of his generation, Hogan entered the workforce and took on regular jobs. One of his most notable positions was working on the Sydney Harbour Bridge. The job demanded strength, endurance, and courage. High above the water, workers faced difficult conditions every day. For Hogan, these experiences became part of the foundation that shaped his character. The future star was not living in a world of cameras and interviews. He was surrounded by coworkers, construction projects, and long workdays. However, even in these environments, his personality stood out. Friends and colleagues often enjoyed his humor. He could tell stories, make observations, and bring laughter into ordinary situations. What seemed like casual entertainment at the time would later become one of his greatest strengths. During these years, another important part of Hogan's life was beginning to take shape. In 1958, he married Nolene Edwards. Both were young and looking toward the future. Their relationship developed during a period when neither could have predicted what was coming next. Together, they built a family and created a life centered around everyday responsibilities. For Hogan, family became a major priority. As the years passed, he balanced work obligations with life at home. There were bills to pay, children to raise, and goals to pursue. The routine was familiar to millions of people around the world. Success was measured not by fame, but by stability and providing for loved ones. Photographs from those years show a man who looked comfortable far from the spotlight. Nothing suggested that international recognition was waiting just around the corner. Yet beneath the surface, something else was happening. Hogan possessed a natural gift for connecting with people. He understood humor in a way that felt genuine and effortless. Instead of relying on rehearsed jokes, he often drew laughter from simple observations about everyday life. This talent gradually became more noticeable. Friends encouraged him. Conversations often turned into performances. People enjoyed listening to him speak. His confidence grew, even if he still viewed himself as an ordinary worker rather than an entertainer. Meanwhile, Australia's television industry was expanding. New programs were attracting audiences across the country. Opportunities existed for fresh personalities, but Hogan remained largely outside that world, at least for the moment. Throughout the 1960s and early 1970s, he continued living a relatively normal life. Family remained at the center of his attention. His relationship with Nolene evolved through the ups and downs that many couples experience. They shared important milestones, celebrated achievements, and faced challenges together. These years also helped shape Hogan's understanding of loyalty and commitment. The emotional connections formed during this period would remain significant throughout his life. Even as circumstances changed later, the memories and experiences from these early years never completely disappeared. As time moved forward, Hogan's sense of humor continued attracting attention. More people began noticing his ability to entertain. What started as casual storytelling among friends slowly moved towards something larger. Then, an unexpected opportunity appeared. A television talent program called New Faces became an unlikely turning point. Unlike many contestants, Hogan was not a trained performer trying to break into show business. Instead, he arrived with the confidence and authenticity of someone who had spent years working regular jobs. His appearance immediately caught attention. Audiences responded to his natural personality. He seemed different from traditional entertainers. There was no polished image, no carefully crafted act, just a charismatic Australian with a unique sense of humor. The public loved it. What happened next surprised many people, including Hogan himself. Television executives saw potential. Producers recognized that viewers connected with him in a special way. Opportunities began appearing that would have seemed impossible only a few years earlier. Suddenly, the world beyond construction sites and ordinary routines was opening its doors. For Hogan, the change was exciting. It offered possibilities he had never imagined. It promised adventure, success, and a chance to share his humor with larger audiences. But every opportunity comes with a price. As his career started moving in a new direction, the demands on his time increased. The balance between personal life and professional ambition became harder to maintain. New responsibilities emerged, and the simple life he had always known began changing. Standing at the edge of a remarkable new chapter, Hogan could not yet see how dramatically his future would unfold. The fame, attention, and success that were approaching would bring rewards beyond his dreams. Yet they would also place enormous pressure on the relationships that had helped shape the man he had become. But the opportunity that would transform Paul Hogan's life was about to bring unexpected challenges to the people closest to him. When Paul Hogan first stepped into the world of television, few people could have predicted what would happen next. He did not fit the traditional image of a celebrity. He was not a trained actor. He had not spent years studying performance. He came from construction sites, working-class neighborhoods, and a life that looked much like that of millions of ordinary Australians. Yet that was exactly what made him different. Audiences saw someone who felt real. During the early 1970s, Hogan's appearances on Australian television quickly gained attention. His relaxed personality, natural confidence, and sharp humor connected with viewers in a way producers had rarely seen before. Instead of sounding rehearsed, he seemed like the kind of person viewers might know personally. People trusted him. As his popularity grew, television executives began offering him larger opportunities. Soon, he was no longer simply appearing on programs. He was becoming a major television personality in his own right. The transformation happened faster than many expected. Across Australia, more viewers tuned in to watch him. His jokes and observations reflected everyday life. He spoke in a style that felt familiar. In a rapidly changing entertainment industry, Hogan stood out because he never seemed to be pretending to be someone else. As the audience watched, a new national star was being born. By the middle of the decade, The Paul Hogan Show became one of Australia's most successful television programs. The series combined comedy sketches, humorous commentary, and Hogan's unique charm. The show attracted millions of viewers. Week after week, families gathered around their televisions to watch. Hogan's popularity expanded far beyond what anyone had imagined when he first appeared on television. Success brought financial rewards. It brought recognition. And it brought opportunities that extended beyond Australia's borders. For someone who had spent years working physical labor jobs, the change was remarkable. Hogan had entered a completely different world. However, while audiences saw a confident entertainer, life behind the scenes was becoming more complicated. Fame has a way of changing daily routines. Schedules became demanding. Television production required long hours. Meetings, appearances, interviews, and creative responsibilities filled his calendar. The simple balance he once maintained between work and family became increasingly difficult to preserve. The more successful he became, the less predictable life became. At home, responsibilities still existed. Family obligations did not disappear simply because television success had arrived. Yet fame often demands attention at all hours. This created challenges that many successful entertainers face. Every achievement seemed to bring new pressures. Every opportunity required additional sacrifices. People closest to Hogan experienced these changes alongside him. Relationships that had developed during simpler times now had to adapt to an entirely different reality. Public attention added another layer of complexity. The media became increasingly interested in Hogan's personal life. Viewers who admired him on television wanted to know more about the man behind the jokes. Newspapers and magazines followed his career closely. As his profile grew, privacy became harder to protect. For years, Hogan had enjoyed the freedom of living outside the public eye. Now that freedom was slowly disappearing. Meanwhile, opportunities continued arriving. One of the biggest came through advertising. Hogan became the face of a successful tourism campaign that promoted Australia to international audiences. His relaxed style and unmistakable Australian identity made him the perfect ambassador. The campaign was a massive success. People around the world began recognizing his face and voice. What had started as national fame was gradually becoming something much larger. International doors were opening. For Hogan, these developments were exciting. They represented achievements that few could have imagined during his years on the Sydney Harbour Bridge. His hard work and talent were paying off in extraordinary ways. Yet success rarely arrives without consequences. The demands of a growing career placed enormous strain on personal relationships. Time became one of the most valuable and limited resources in his life. Family members sometimes saw less of him. Travel became more frequent. Professional commitments often took priority. The emotional distance that can emerge during periods of intense success slowly became a reality. Those closest to him faced challenges that audiences never saw. Behind the laughter and television appearances, important relationships were being tested by circumstances that neither fame nor money could easily solve. At the same time, Hogan himself was changing. The construction worker, who had once entertained friends with casual jokes, was now a major television star carrying the expectations of an entire audience. With every passing year, his career expanded further. But so did the pressure. The balance between public success and private happiness became increasingly difficult to maintain. As the late 1970s turned into the early 1980s, Hogan found himself standing at another crossroads. He had achieved extraordinary success in Australia, but even greater opportunities seemed to be waiting beyond the horizon. Hollywood was beginning to take notice. The world was about to discover Paul Hogan. And during this period of rapid change, another relationship was quietly entering his life, one that would eventually become one of the most talked about chapters in his personal story. At first, few people realized how significant this connection would become. But the course of Hogan's life was already beginning to shift in ways that would affect both his future and the people around him. Just as Paul Hogan reached new heights of success, a relationship entered his life that would change everything forever. By the early 1980s, Paul Hogan had become one of Australia's biggest stars. His television success had made him a household name, and his tourism advertisements had introduced his personality to audiences far beyond Australia. Yet despite everything he had achieved, the biggest chapter of his career was still ahead. It began with an idea. Hogan believed there was a story that international audiences had never seen before. He wanted to create a film centered around a uniquely Australian character, a rugged outdoorsman whose simple wisdom would collide with modern city life. Many people thought the idea was risky. Hollywood was dominated by major studios and established stars. Hogan was neither. He was a television personality from Australia with limited experience in feature films. Yet he remained determined. Working alongside trusted collaborators, he helped develop what would eventually become Crocodile Dundee. Few could have predicted what would happen next. When the film was released in 1986, it became a global phenomenon. Audiences embraced the character of Mick Dundee. The humor, charm, and fish-out-of-water story connected with viewers around the world. The movie earned hundreds of millions of dollars and became one of the most successful films of the decade. Almost overnight, Hogan transformed from a popular Australian entertainer into an international movie star. The success changed everything. Media attention exploded. Journalists wanted interviews. Television networks requested appearances. Hollywood suddenly welcomed the Australian who had once worked on the Sydney Harbour Bridge. As audiences filled theaters around the world, Hogan's life entered a completely new phase. But another important story was unfolding behind the scenes. During the production of Crocodile Dundee, Hogan worked closely with actress Linda Kozlowski, who played Sue Charlton in the film. On screen, their characters developed a memorable connection. Off-screen, a real relationship gradually began to grow. At first, the focus remained on the movie itself. The cast traveled, promoted the film, and celebrated its extraordinary success. Yet spending long periods together created opportunities for deeper personal connections. Both were experiencing a unique moment in their lives. The film's popularity brought excitement, pressure, and constant public attention. Through it all, Hogan and Kozlowski shared experiences that few others could fully understand. As time passed, their bond strengthened. The relationship attracted increasing attention from the media. Reporters followed developments closely. Fans became curious about the connection between the two stars. What had begun as a professional partnership was evolving into something far more personal. For Hogan, the situation was complicated. His personal life was already under intense public scrutiny. Every decision attracted headlines. Every development became a topic of discussion. The attention only grew stronger as his relationship with Kozlowski became more visible. Public fascination often focuses on simple narratives. Real life is rarely that simple. Behind newspaper stories and magazine covers were individuals trying to navigate complicated emotions while living under the spotlight. The pressures of fame made every personal decision more difficult. At the same time, Hogan's career continued expanding. Crocodile Dundee 2 arrived in 1988 and became another major success. International audiences remained fascinated by both the character and the man who portrayed him. The world wanted more of Paul Hogan. Yet professional triumphs could not eliminate personal challenges. The growing relationship with Kozlowski represented a major turning point in his life. Their connection deepened over the years, eventually leading to marriage in 1990. For many observers, they appeared to be a perfect Hollywood success story. They shared global fame. They shared a successful film franchise. And they appeared committed to building a future together. As the audience watched from afar, photographs captured moments of happiness. Red carpet appearances, interviews, and public events painted a picture of a couple navigating celebrity life side by side. But fame often hides realities that cameras cannot capture. Life inside the entertainment industry can be demanding. Constant travel, professional obligations, and public expectations place enormous pressure on relationships. Even strong bonds face challenges. Throughout the years, Hogan and Kozlowski worked to build a life together while balancing the unique demands of international celebrity. They welcomed a son and created family memories away from the cameras whenever possible. Yet the spotlight never completely disappeared. Every public appearance attracted attention. Every career decision became news. Every stage of their relationship unfolded under the watchful eye of the media. Despite these pressures, many people close to the couple believed there was genuine affection between them. Their shared experiences had created a connection that seemed to endure through both success and adversity. For Hogan, this relationship became one of the defining parts of his later life. Years passed. Careers evolved. The excitement surrounding Crocodile Dundee eventually settled into Hollywood history. But the bond formed during those remarkable years remained central to his personal story. As time moved forward, however, new challenges began to emerge. The realities of aging, changing priorities, and the passage of decades would test even the strongest relationships. And the next chapter would reveal just how difficult those tests could become. Yet even a love that seemed undeniable would face obstacles neither of them could fully control. For many people, success is measured by awards, wealth, or fame. But as the years passed, Paul Hogan began to discover that life could not be measured so easily. By the 1990s, he had already achieved what many entertainers spend entire careers chasing. He was internationally recognized. His films had earned enormous success. Audiences across the world knew his name. From the outside, it appeared that he had everything. Yet life continued moving forward. And with time came new challenges. The entertainment industry was changing. New stars emerged. Audience tastes evolved. While Hogan remained a respected figure, the intense spotlight that surrounded Crocodile Dundee gradually began to fade. This transition happens to many celebrities. The excitement of worldwide fame eventually gives way to a quieter reality. For Hogan, this period created space for reflection. The constant rush of movie premieres, interviews, and major productions slowed. More attention shifted toward family life and personal priorities. As the audience watched old clips and photographs from earlier decades, it became clear how much time had passed. The young television comedian from Sydney had become an older man looking back on an extraordinary journey. At home, life continued to evolve. His relationship with Linda Kozlowski remained an important part of his world. Together, they had experienced remarkable highs and difficult challenges. They had raised a son and shared years of memories that stretched across continents and careers. But even the strongest relationships can face strain. Long-term partnerships are shaped by change. People grow older. Goals shift. Priorities evolve. The experiences that once brought two people together can sometimes lead them in different directions. For Hogan and Kozlowski, the passing years brought both joy and complexity. The pressures of public life never completely disappeared. Even when media attention lessened, their relationship remained a topic of interest. Fans continued following their story, remembering the chemistry that had first captivated audiences during Crocodile Dundee. Meanwhile, Hogan faced additional challenges. Aging brought new realities. The energetic entertainer, who once seemed larger than life, now confronted the same questions that eventually reach everyone. What truly mattered? Which achievements carried the greatest meaning? And what kind of legacy would remain behind? These questions became increasingly important. Success had already been achieved. Recognition had already been earned. What remained was understanding what those accomplishments actually meant. Throughout this period, Hogan often spoke about the importance of family. While his public image had always centered around humor and confidence, those closest to him understood that personal relationships occupied a much deeper place in his life. The people who had shared his journey mattered more than the headlines, more than the box office numbers, more than the awards. As the years passed, Hogan increasingly reflected on the connections that had shaped him. Then came another major turning point. In 2014, after more than 2 decades of marriage, Hogan and Kozlowski divorced. The news surprised many fans. For years, they had been viewed as one of the entertainment industry's lasting couples. Their relationship had survived enormous public attention and the pressures of celebrity life. Yet, like many relationships, theirs faced challenges that outsiders could never fully understand. Reports suggested the separation was respectful rather than hostile. Even so, the end of such a significant chapter marked a profound moment in Hogan's life. The woman who had shared so many defining experiences was no longer his wife. For anyone, such a change would be difficult. For someone looking back on decades of memories, the emotional impact could be even greater. The years following the divorce brought additional opportunities for reflection. Hogan spent more time considering the path his life had taken. Interviews occasionally revealed glimpses of a more thoughtful and introspective side of the man who had once dominated comedy screens. He spoke less about fame, more about life, more about family, more about the people who had mattered most. As the audience watched footage from different stages of his career, a pattern became visible. No matter how much success Hogan achieved, his thoughts often returned to personal relationships. The people who stood beside him during important moments. The people who helped shape his journey. The people who remained unforgettable. By now, the focus was no longer on career milestones alone. It was about meaning, about memory, about understanding what truly lasts after decades have passed. As Hogan entered his 80s, those reflections became even deeper. The world continued to remember him as Crocodile Dundee, but he increasingly seemed to view his life through a different lens. A lens shaped by love, family, and the choices that defined his personal story. And among all those memories, one relationship continued to stand out above the rest. One name appeared again and again whenever the conversation turned toward the most meaningful parts of his life. The realization had been building quietly for years. Soon, Paul Hogan would finally put those feelings into words. As Paul Hogan reflected on the decades behind him, one name continued to stand above all the rest. By the time Paul Hogan reached his mid-80s, he had lived a life few people could imagine. He had gone from working on the Sydney Harbour Bridge to becoming one of the most recognizable faces in the world. He had experienced extraordinary success, global fame, and personal challenges that unfolded in front of millions. Yet age often brings a different perspective. The things that once seemed most important begin to change. Career achievements remain meaningful, but they are no longer the only measure of a life. Memories become more valuable. Relationships take on greater significance. The people who shared the journey begin to matter more than the applause. For Hogan, these reflections became increasingly visible in his later years. As old interviews, film clips, and photographs appeared on television specials and documentaries, audiences were reminded of the remarkable path he had traveled. The laughter, the success, and the unforgettable character of Mick Dundee had secured his place in entertainment history. But behind every famous public figure is a private story. And in Hogan's case, that story often returned to one central theme: love. Not the kind found in movie scripts, not the kind created for headlines, but the kind that leaves a permanent mark on a person's life. As he reflected on the decades behind him, Hogan appeared increasingly willing to speak honestly about the relationships that shaped him. The passing years had softened many of the public controversies that once surrounded his personal life. What remained were the memories, the moments shared with the people who mattered most, the experiences that continued to carry emotional weight long after the cameras stopped rolling. Among those memories, Linda Kozlowski occupied a unique place. Their story had begun during one of the most exciting periods of Hogan's life. Together they experienced a level of success that few couples ever encounter. They traveled the world, built a family, and shared countless moments that became part of both their personal history and Hollywood history. The relationship was not perfect. No long relationship ever is. There were challenges. There were changes. There were difficult decisions. Yet despite everything that happened, the connection they shared remained one of the defining chapters of Hogan's life. As the audience watches archival footage from the Crocodile Dundee years, the chemistry between them is easy to see. The smiles appear genuine. The comfort they shared seems natural. Those moments became part of a larger story, a story that continued long after the movies ended. In later interviews and public reflections, Hogan often seemed less interested in discussing fame than in discussing the people who influenced him. Success could be measured in dollars and awards, but personal relationships were measured differently. They were measured by impact, by memory, by what remained in the heart after everything else had faded. At 86, Hogan stood in a position few people ever reach. He could look back across nearly an entire lifetime and evaluate what truly mattered. Many accomplishments stood before him. Television success, international stardom, one of the most successful Australian films ever made, a career that inspired generations of performers. Yet when conversations turned toward personal fulfillment, another subject frequently emerged: the people he loved. And among those people, one woman seemed to hold a special place. For many viewers, this realization carried a powerful message. The world often assumes that fame brings ultimate happiness. Hogan's story suggested something different. Success can create opportunities. It can provide comfort. It can bring recognition. But it cannot replace genuine human connection. As the years passed, that lesson appeared to become increasingly important to him. Looking back, the construction worker from Sydney had achieved everything he once could have dreamed of. Yet the memories that seemed to matter most were not always connected to professional victories. They were connected to relationships, to family, to love. That perspective gave greater meaning to his reflections in later life. Rather than focusing on what he had accomplished, he increasingly focused on who had accompanied him on the journey. The audience sees a man who understands the value of time, a man who recognizes that careers eventually end, public attention fades, and headlines are forgotten. But some relationships leave a lasting imprint. Some people remain important no matter how many years pass. And some loves continue to shape a person's life long after circumstances have changed. For Paul Hogan, that realization may be one of the most honest reflections of his entire journey. The laughter, fame, and success made him a global icon. But the relationships he built made him who he was. And at 86, that truth seemed clearer than ever before. Call to action. If you enjoyed this documentary, be sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications